Good evening, everybody. I'm just waiting till a few more people are able to enter the presentation room, as we call it. I think we're about halfway there. Okay, it looks like we've reached a no, people are still logging in. Okay, well, we give it another minute or so. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and start. So good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening to our discussion about the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation's plans to improve Phillips Manor Hall. I'm Laura Starr from Starr White House Landscape Architects and Planners, and we're here because we're here to facilitate this evening's discussion. We had been working with state parks on some other sites in the lower part of the state before COVID started, and we're doing a lot of face-to-face community engagement. And then when COVID started, we had to switch to this virtual platform, and we actually developed some effective ways to use this platform to really get a good discussion going and to get community feedback on ideas. So that's why we're here tonight. We're going to be using this program called Mentimeter, where at different periods during the presentation, we can poll you and get your opinion and your input on the various kind of chapters of the presentation. So what we're going to do is that the park staff will be giving a presentation on the building improvements, the site improvements, and also some very exciting ideas for the programming of the building. And as they're presenting, you can ask questions through the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. Then we're going to, and somebody's saying they can only see the translator, not the speaker. Can you guys not see me? Okay, I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to keep going here. Now they see me. Okay, sorry. The joys of virtual life. Okay, so as I said, Parks will be giving a presentation, and then you can enter questions into the question and answer feed at the bottom of the screen, and then I will be I'll be reading the questions off at the end of the presentation, and we will be answering them. The Parks team will be answering them. There's also the chat box, which I see people have already been using for various comments, so continue to use that. And finally, we're very lucky to have 2 ASL interpreters with us tonight. And if you would like to make use of the interpreters, their screen can be also found in the chat, the link to their screen. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dorothy McCausland, who's the planner from Starr White House, who's going to explain how the Mentimeter works and run through the first couple of questions about the site. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. As Laura mentioned, I'm Dorothy. I work with Laura, and happy to be running you through the presentation tonight and how to use Mentimeter. So I'm going to take us to our first Mentimeter question. And as Laura mentioned, this is an interactive polling tool, which allows us to get feedback from you in real time, and you will see it projected onto the screen in front of you after everyone has had a chance to respond. So the way you use this tool is you go to www.menti.com and you use the code that you can see at the top of the screen. It's 45748159. You can do this on your mobile phone, on a separate internet browser, and you can go ahead and answer the question that you see once you've entered that code. So here the question is, how often do you visit Phillips Manor Hall? So I'm going to go ahead and open voting, and that means that you can go ahead and enter this code at menti.com and submit your vote. So with this question, we're just trying to get a sense of who is here tonight and how often you visit the site and what your relationship to the site is. We will have about 6 or 7 of these questions scattered throughout the presentation tonight. Each time we have one of these questions, it will be on the same website with the same code, so you don't need to enter a new code every time. I see some results are coming in. We have 15 responses so far. That's great. We have a handy timer. So I'm going to just start a 30-second timer, give folks 30 more seconds to respond to this question. Okay, so voting is now closed and we're going to look at the results. So it looks like most of the respondents go a few times a year. We have a number of people that go weekly, a few that go monthly, and then a few that have been once or twice. Everyone that responded has been to the museum, so that's great. Excuse me, to the Manor Hall. So our next question. So what brings you to Phillips Manor Hall? This is an open response question. It's going to allow you to respond in a few words or longer. And we're going to give you a little bit more time to answer this question so you can think about what brings you to Phillips Manor Hall. So I just opened voting. It looks like we have answers coming in pretty quickly now. Most people, or a good number of people, are finishing up. So I'm going to add a 30-second timer, 30 more seconds until voting closes. Okay, voting is now closed. And the results are, oh, this is fun. So probably no surprise, but history is the most frequently occurring word in people's responses. So this word cloud represents the frequency with which the responses were given. So the most frequently used word was history. Events and tours were also frequently used. And then it looks like we have a few responses that maybe just one or two people entered. I am going to just read a few of them instead of going through all of them, but I see performances, monthly art exhibit, volunteering, free events, programs and events, Yonkers heritage, outdoor space, architecture, green space. So a lot of variety in these answers. All of these answers are going to be saved and downloaded after this presentation. So even if I didn't read your answer out loud, that doesn't mean that we're not recording it. We will be saving all these answers, all this data, and it will be used for future planning phases. So with that, I would like to hand it off to Daniel McKay, who is the Deputy Commissioner of the Division of Historic Preservation, and I will join you again later for some more questions. Daniel?
Thank you and good evening. Welcome to the second of two public forums regarding OPRHP's landscape building and interpretive plan proposals for Phillips Manor Hall State Historic Site. We are nearing 60 attendees, a good showing from the community. Thank you for dedicating your time this evening. And I see that representatives and staff from local elected offices have also joined us tonight, and we are particularly appreciative of their attendance. I am Daniel McKay. I serve as Deputy Commissioner for Historic Preservation and as the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer. And within the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, I oversee the staff at the Division for Historic Preservation. And within the Division for Historic Preservation is the Bureau of Historic Sites, the portion of our agency that provides capital funding and a wide range of technical support and training to the agency's 35 historic sites and the staff at those sites. We also provide technical support to museums and archival collections throughout the rest of the state park system. This technical support role includes collection storage and administration, conservation laboratories such as paper conservation, furniture conservation, object conservation, painting conservation, research and interpretive initiatives such as are being applied in this project, exhibit design and fabrication, and programming support. We have a widely and deeply experienced staff at the Bureau of Historic Sites, as the Phillips Manor Hall site staff will themselves attest. I'm going to take several minutes at the front end of this presentation to set the context for our proposed investments at Phillips Manor Hall State Historic Site. So next slide, please, Dorothy. Thank you. So what is it that we are reimagining Phillips Manor Hall State Historic Site? This presentation tonight will take you through the project inspiration and project proposal. We certainly will have a component of community input and Q&A, and then we will make very clear what the follow-up and next steps are so that you can continue to get involved, provide input, and stay on track with this project. I want to provide at the start some general background as to the origins of this project at Phillips Manor Hall and the agency's Our Whole History initiative. This presentation will then get into the details of the agency's specific proposal for that project at Phillips Manor Hall. Staff at the Division for Historic Preservation have been looking ahead at a number of major commemorative anniversaries that will be recognized and celebrated over the next decade plus here in New York. The 250th anniversary of the American Revolution is the first. The agency has been making plans to commemorate our state's rich and complex history related to the American Revolution. New York State served a central and arguably the primary role in the American Revolution, the politics, the military campaign, and related issues. The New York State park system has 40 sites and parks that have a direct connection to events and personages associated with the Revolution. And of course, Phillips Manor Hall is one of those. Our agency expects to commemorate this anniversary across an 8-year period from 2024 through 2032 and perhaps beyond. And we aspire to physical and interpretive upgrades across these sites so that we can welcome the nation to New York for this commemoration. 2026 will mark the 400th anniversary of the arrival of enslaved Africans during the Dutch colonial era. And 2027 marks the 200th anniversary of the end of enslavement in New York State. A number of our historic sites are connected to New York State's history with enslavement and emancipation. Phillips Manor Hall, one of those sites, has perhaps the most unique and notable connection due to the Phillips family's direct affiliation with the enslavement and trade of Africans during the Dutch, English, and American colonial periods. Internally, the agency has invested significant efforts to assess how best to commemorate these anniversaries and position each of our historic sites to share meaningful and effective stories that accurately and fully reflect the diversity of our state and national history. And from this comes the Our Whole History initiative, which we are seeking to pilot at Phillips Manor Hall. The Our Whole History initiative commits New York State Parks to undertaking new exhibits, new interpretation, and new programming that better depicts the diversity, humanity, and influence of our state's peoples, and further strives to highlight the role that traditionally underrepresented communities have played in shaping New York's history to the diverse local, state, national, and international audience that visits our state parks and historic sites. Next slide, please. So what is the whole history of Phillips Manor Hall? At its most simple, it is an inclusive story about the different groups of people associated with this site over time. The Phillips family and other European settlers, Native Americans, and people of African descent, all of whom lived together on this land, interacted with each other, and played a role in creating the colony of New Netherland and later colonial New York. It is about the role of the Manor Hall as a civic centerpiece in the developing village and city of Yonkers. It is about the generosity and vision of the Cochran family's bequests. We'll provide further details regarding each of these components, interpretive components, when we present our plans later in this programming. But all those pieces are there. Next slide, please. So what this proposal involves are really 3 distinct elements. Proposed improvements to the buildings and landscape, including work to address long identified building and site needs to provide ADA accessibility, improved programming spaces, event support, such as catering, as well as for the agency to address deferred maintenance projects. Parks has developed preliminary architectural designs based on these long-established needs. We will present current plans this evening, and these plans will be finalized with your input from community forums such as this. New exhibits. We are in the preliminary concept phase of adapting our whole history to the story of Phillips Manor Hall. Content will be developed and refined over the next 9 months. And at this point in time, we are working with outside consultants, a firm called Amaze Designs out of Boston, Mass. And they bring extraordinary additional capability to our in-house agency team. And new programming. we have developed a preliminary list of programming ideas for the 2022-2023 season when the site reopens to launch the site in its new role. We welcome more ideas for creative and interesting and community-driven content related to the site's varied history and desired role in the community. And as I prepare to hand this presentation off to other members of our parks team, I want to underscore several additional items. First, I want to acknowledge that Phillips Manor Hall is one of Westchester County's oldest buildings. It is often described as the county and city's oldest intact building. As such, it is also the oldest structure in the New York State Park System, and I want to assure you that park staff holds this building in the same esteem as local residents. The Manor Hall was established as a National Historic Landmark in 1961. It was subsequently listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1966. It is one of more than 26 parks and sites within the state park system that has earned National Historic Landmark status. The most recently listed was Grant's Cottage, upstate, this past fall. The proposals prepared for your review today reflect our staff's commitment to honor the building, its history, its materials, even as we pursue long desired upgrades, such as ADA compatible access to the second floor at the site. All future work at this site will conform to the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. These standards, a series of concepts about maintaining, repairing, and replacing historic materials, as well as about designing new additions or making alterations, will provide consistency and a unifying framework for this work. Second, I want to assure you of the quality of the parks team on this project. You will meet, or will meet again, several of our staff during this presentation, but you have seen their work before. The traveling and temporary exhibits you have enjoyed over the past decade are a product of the Bureau of Historic Sites. And as a refresher, those exhibits included the People's Choice exhibit, which explored political issues surrounding each presidential election and made extensive use of the Cochrane Collection portraits. An exhibit entitled Slavery, the Great and Foul Stain, which examined the political positions and attitudes of each president toward the issue of slavery. That exhibit also relied heavily on the Cochrane Collection. And the Current Immigration exhibit, which connects some of the Cochrane paintings to the immigration story. And so those three exhibits, all of which were developed in-house, have been hallmarks of the site's educational role over the past decade. This same proven staff is the core team for the Our Whole History initiative, joined by Amaze Designs, referenced earlier, an internationally recognized museum exhibit design firm based in Boston, Massachusetts. We're working very closely with them. Finally, I want to share that while the Our Whole History initiative is being piloted at Phillips Manor Hall, other major projects in the state park system will soon follow in this vein, such as an exhibit upgrade at Washington's headquarters state historic site in Newburgh, and exhibits featuring the history and cultural practices of the Seneca Nation at our newly announced visitor center at Niagara Falls State Park. With that overview, I would like now to introduce Garrett Jobson. He serves as Capital Facilities Program District Manager for our Hudson District. He will provide an overview of the proposed landscape changes and enhancements. Thank you. Garrett, it's yours.
Sure. Thank you, Daniel. Again, I am Garrett Jobson, Hudson Valley District Manager. The agency has engaged the consultant, Saratoga Associates, for the development of site and building design for the project. I am looking forward to reviewing the proposed landscape improvements for Phillips Manor Hall. Next slide. Phillips Manor Hall's evolving landscape. These pictures and illustrations are important and interesting because they show that the landscape of the site has changed over time. As these images show, the landscape has transformed many times over the years. There are images that include fences and some that do not. There are trees, shrubs, hedges, and paths shown in various locations. This changing landscape is important to keep in mind as we consider proposed landscape improvements. Next slide. Existing conditions. This slide includes photographs for reference for the nearly 1 acre site. Photograph 1 is the view from Warburton Avenue, showing the front yard. Photograph 2, this photograph shows the view up from Dock Street looking north. Photograph 3 is looking south, which shows the side and rear view of the site. Photograph 4 provides a view of the existing parking area. Next slide. This slide shows landscape enhancements for consideration. This plan suggests a widened walkway from Warburton Avenue sidewalk that will connect to the entrance of the Manor Hall. The widened walk will help direct visitors to the building entry. A widened walk at the building entrance will provide emphasis and provide space for visitors as they wait to enter and leave the Manor Hall. The proposed plan has a new walkway with interpretive signs that provides access around the Civil War monument and cannons. This requires a minor relocation of the Civil War cannons on site. The Civil War cannons will be moved closer to the monument to allow for the entry pathway work. The Spanish-American War cannon is proposed to be relocated off-site and stored. This work will provide for an unobstructed open green space for events and gatherings. The fence around the perimeter of the site will be restored, repainted, and repaired with some minor adjustments. The proposed design includes improved pedestrian paths. The enhanced pathways will improve accessibility and pedestrian circulation of the site. New plantings and shade trees. The proposed plan includes new plantings and will also incorporate much of the existing vegetation into the design. The designer has been directed to incorporate existing trees and shrubs in the design as much as practical. Many trees and shrubs will be saved and protected. The current planting plan will remove the hedge in front of the Manor Hall to open the view to the building and improve access to the lawn area for events and activities. The trees currently planned to be removed from the site include the holly located at the new building addition and a pine adjacent to the parking area. Some of the trees and shrubs along the northern property boundary may be impacted due to parking and pathway work. But the design goal is to limit impact to existing vegetation. A new holly will be planted on site. There are new trees, shrubs, herbaceous vegetation, and flowers proposed for the site. There will be new defined mulched landscape beds. Existing trees and shrubs to remain will be pruned and mulched. New benches and wayfinding signs are planned for the property. New sod will be installed in lawn areas, improving the surface for outdoor events, programs, and activities. There will be general site lighting, and the exterior of the manor will be able to be lit. These lighting improvements will improve the facility to host evening events. Existing bluestone slabs will be reused on site. There will be improved drainage. The maintenance area will be visually screened. An improved parking lot with bike rack is proposed. The improved lot will be taking up roughly the same area currently used for parking. The existing parking lot does not have clearly delineated spaces. The proposed concept plan has a defined parking area and includes a total of 10 spaces currently. The parking area will also be available as a potential outdoor event space. This summarizes the proposed comprehensive landscape improvements for consideration and comment. Next slide. Now I would like to introduce Patrick Kazakowicz, Senior Architect with the Hudson Valley District, who will review the building design proposals.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you, Daniel. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here tonight. Tonight, I'm going to discuss two important aspects to improvements that we propose making to the building, which we all know as Phillips Manor Hall. Next slide, please. Thank you. First, we need to assure the building is usable for all visitors by bringing it into compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, commonly referred to as the ADA. I'll discuss how we propose to do that in just a minute. Second, it's time that this landmark Georgian-style building receives some of the maintenance and restorative work that's been deferred over time. That includes things like cornice repairs, masonry repointing, woodwork repairs, interior painting, and many other areas of restoration. In order to provide more accessibility, new bathrooms and an elevator are necessary. Note in this rendering the carefully placed proposed service wing. It's that wing or addition which includes an elevator and 2 bathrooms on each level. The designers were asked to minimize the physical attachment impacts to the historic Manor Hall. To do just that, the construction of the wing uses a combination of natural stone and glazing to provide a hyphenated connection to the historic manor. Next slide, please. Thank you. In this next slide, looking from the southwest, the service wing can be seen fully detached from the Manor Hall's oldest constructed portion. Note the new wing's use of glass facing the old building. The reason for this detachment is twofold. One, being sensitive to the manor exterior, covering and contacting it as little as possible. Next slide, please. And 2, this detachment provides an opportunity for visitors to admire the historic stonework and fenestration from the interior of the service wing, as this can be seen here. From a philosophical perspective, the team felt that it was more appropriate to encourage visitors to admire and study the historic stone wall and windows while standing inside the hallways, rather than creating an unused and forgotten alley. This hallway, on both the first and second levels, provides access to the new bathrooms and the elevator, of course. Next slide. Thanks. Now we'll look at the first floor plan, which shows the proposed service wing shown in color. The portion in black and white is the existing Manor Hall. The service wing hallway is shown yellow. The red rectangle is the elevator, while the light blue squares show 2 bathrooms, one being accessible. Now, I had mentioned that the designers were intent on minimizing impacts on the historic Manor Hall. And to achieve that here, we use an existing doorway to provide access into the service wing on the first floor. You can see both those doors, by the way, on the left, those 2 images. Next slide, please. Now let's go up to the second floor. Here you can see the same footprint for the service wing, indicating that the access to the wing is through an existing large window located farther south in the Gothic Chamber. Once again, this location was selected to minimize disturbance to historic building materials. And remember, all throughout, restoration work will take place in the historic interior and exterior of Phillips Manor Hall, meeting the preservation needs that the building requires. Next slide, please. Right, and so let's not forget about the brick caretaker's cottage seen here. We're going to give it attention with plans to make the first floor accessible and convert some of the office space into a direct access catering kitchen. You can see that kitchen area on the lower portion of the floor plan. So in conclusion, I hope this presentation provided you with good insight into our preservation goals and how we prepare to meet the physical building needs at Phillips Manor Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. And we're back with some more questions from Mentimeter. Our next question is, of the improvements that have been proposed that you've seen so far, which are you most excited about? So this is a ranked response question. So you're going to go through these 6 options and rank which ones you're most excited about at the top and the ones you're less excited about at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and open polling. Again, this is a ranked response question. If you are just joining us, you can go to www.menti.com and respond to these questions by using this code 45748159, and that will allow you to respond to the questions that you see on the screen. Okay, we've got a good number of responses in. I'm going to start our 30-second timer. So voting will close in 30 seconds. Okay, let's see our results. So our most popular answer is ADA compliance. That is for the elevator, paths, and general access to the building, followed by interior restoration, landscape, exterior restoration, additional bathrooms, and the caretaker's cottage rehabilitation. So thank you to everyone who voted. Much appreciated. Our next question is another open response question. And in this one, we're looking for your suggestions. So what suggestions do you have to make the proposed improvements to Phillips Manor Hall even better? So we're curious to hear from you about your own ideas here. And we're going to give you a little bit more time to respond to this one because it is an open response. So you might want to put a little bit more thought into it. So I've opened voting and we're going to give a little bit longer. I'll start a 30-second countdown in probably a minute or so. Okay, so I'm going to start our 30-second timer. So polls are going to close in 30 seconds. So if you are writing something, try to finish it up and submit it. You have 20 seconds. Okay. So the format of these responses, as you can see, is comment boxes. I'm going to just choose a few to read. As I mentioned earlier, all of these comments will be considered and saved. Just because I don't read your comment out loud doesn't mean that we're not going to review it and think about it. So let's see, we've got welcoming to all, include more parking and a gift shop, holograms that talk and an herb garden, increased staffing, a fire suppression system, consult local historians, community art space added, shaded areas for outdoor use, elevator shaft is overbearing, consider different materials here, cross-laminated timber is suggested, community gallery. Okay, thank you all very much for these thoughtful responses. We really appreciate it. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Kirsten Gustafson, the Interpretive Program Coordinator, and she's going to take it from here. Kirsten, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Dorothy. Like Dorothy said, excuse me, my name is Kirsten Gustafson, and I am the Interpretive Programs Coordinator, which in my case means that I'm the team lead for the interpretive unit at the Bureau of Historic Sites, which is also known as Peebles Island. This is the team that creates exhibits for historic sites across New York, some of which you may be familiar with, such as recent installations at Schuyler Mansion State Historic Site and Senate House, State Historic Site. Senate House in particular used primary documents that had never been before translated to create groundbreaking research with an entirely new picture of Kingston's Stockade District in the 17th century. This is also the team that has worked with Phillips Manor Hall's own staff in the past to create many of the exhibits that you are familiar with and have enjoyed already. Exhibits such as those that Daniel introduced at the beginning, reminded us of at the beginning, including Slavery, a Great in Palestine, The People's Choice, and the immigration exhibit that has been there for the past few years. Now, exhibits are a critical part of our work at Phillips Manor Hall, and they will build the proposed exhibits that we're hoping for, will build on the work that we have already done there with the staff for years now, and will incorporate the Our Whole History initiative to create a more complete picture of the history there, which is so valuable to both us and you guys. We're thrilled with the comments that we've received in the past. Can I have the next slide, please? What we're proposing is to tell an inclusive story of the site. So one that gives equal weight to the different cultural groups that lived and worked here, including Native Americans, European settlers, Africans, and people of African descent. Next slide, please. These will be innovative exhibits. We hope to adopt a place-based approach that begins with the native population and extends outward to encompass the manor holdings, the Hudson Valley, New Netherland, New York, and worldwide locations. Next slide, please. What you see here is a floor plan of the first story. And to give you a sense of what we are proposing, we can actually take a walk through together. Area 1 on the lower right-hand portion will be tickets and the gift shop. Area 2, proceeding through 2 rooms and a stairwell, will include pieces such as the populated wilderness, which is a cultural introduction, Native American presence, arrival of the Dutch and other Europeans and enslaved Africans, the building of New Netherland, the global trade network, power and wealth and expansion, which includes the Phillips family, the enslaved people, tenant farmers, and Native Americans. Moving onward to Area 3, which includes the stairway and stair hall, and the final room on the first floor, will include pieces about what it means to be a slave society in New York and beyond, the Phillips family and their international trade, the Revolutionary War, and New York becoming a state, and finally, free settlements and the changing cultural fabric of Yonkers and that region. Next slide, please. Now you see here the second story, starting at the top. We'll have the Manor Hall as a civic space and the first restoration period. That includes its function as the city hall, as well as the preservation movement that happened in the early 20th century, including the Cochrane donation, the generous Cochrane donation that made this possible, and the collections associated with that. Below that, in Area 5, you'll see a changing exhibit space labeled here Special Exhibit. Proposed for the first exhibit in that space is called In the Dig, the Importance of Archaeology, which will use archaeology and found archaeological objects to talk about all three cultural groups that interacted in Yonkers and the surrounding area. Area 6 is another special exhibit space or changing exhibit space. And Area 7, the Gothic Hall, will include a community gallery, much as the site has done a wonderful job for several years, bringing in changing community art exhibits. On a temporary basis, it will start with a photography exhibit, which can easily be removed to make space for those changing community exhibits. Now with that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Lavada Nahon. Lavada is the interpreter of African American history for the Bureau of Historic Sites and the interpretive team. Thank you, Lavada.
Thank you, Kirsten. Good evening, everyone. As Kirsten said, my name is Lavada Nahon. I'm the interpreter of African American history, and we want to continue with the presentation and see Phillips Manor Hall as an educational resource. We want to continue that vital link and valuable education resource for students by offering school programs and teacher resources that support the new interpretation material we're looking to put into house. We want to ensure that the exhibit and program content is accessible and that it aligns with New York State curriculum standards. Next slide, please. As an educational resource, we're also creating an online virtual wing, a website which will share the latest multicultural scholarship relating to Phillips Manor history. It will also provide detailed material that we are not able to put in the house, and it will also link to other partner sites within the state system and actually around the New Netherland region that are part of the same historic timeline. Next slide, please. We're looking and proposing to add additional programming to provide a changing roster of workshops, discussions, performances, and seasonal events to support the content, to diversify offerings that will attract a wider audience, and to give voice to the different cultural perspectives. Next slide, please. Some proposed programs include Homes of the Enslaved, the pre-contact cultures of the transatlantic and Indian Ocean slave trade. Helping History, a training program for museum volunteers and others. A Storyteller Circle, stories and folk tales from the three dominant cultural groups of colonial New York. African American revolutionaries, soldiers and spies during the American Revolution. Next slide, please. The Gothic Chamber, a vital community resource, will remain a flexible gathering and community space. As Kirsten mentioned, this will also be the space for the community gallery, and we are hoping to reopen the site with, as she mentioned, a photo exhibit called Saved Places, which links historic preservation sites from around the state. Next slide, please. As an exterior, the grounds are also a vital community resource. So we're looking at the enhanced green space for not just community use, but additional historic and public programming. Next slide, please. Dorothy.
Okay, thank you, Lavada. And thank you all. We're back with the Mentimeter questions, and we have a few more for you. This time we have another ranked answer question. We are looking for your thoughts on what you're looking forward to seeing in the new Phillips Manor Hall exhibits. So I'm going to go ahead and open voting. So if you are joining late, you can participate in this voting by going to menti.com and using the code 45748159. And that will allow you to participate in this interactive polling. You can do so on a smartphone or a separate internet browser. Okay, it looks like we have a good number of results coming in. I'm going to start our 30-second timer. So voting will be open for 30 more seconds. Okay, voting is now closed, and let's look at the results. Okay, so it looks like folks are most excited about the artifacts and touchable reproductions, followed by diversity in the story, guided tours, audio tours, interactive media and content, and multilingual text. So thank you everyone who voted. And our next question for you is another ranked response question. This is particularly for those of you that work in education, or those of you that are students or work or know a student. How can Phillips Manor Hall best serve teachers and students? So the options here are assistance with transportation to the site, creating easy access to materials online, developing materials for classroom use, and creating activities for families to use at home. So voting is open. Okay, answers are coming in quickly on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and start our countdown timer. Okay, so voting is closed now, and let's take a look at the results. So people have identified number one as creating easy access to online and virtual exhibit materials, followed by developing material for teachers to use in the classroom, assistance with transportation to the site, and creating activities for families to use at home. Thank you again to everyone that voted on that question. So this one is an open-ended question, and we're curious to hear from you again, particularly those that are teachers or students or no teachers and students. How else can Phillips Manor Hall best serve teachers and students? Again, this is open-ended, so we're curious to hear your ideas. Anything that was not captured in the previous question, we're hoping to hear about it here. So, so voting is open, and we'll give you a little bit more time this time because it's a free response question. Okay, it looks like responses are slowing down a little bit, so I'm going to start our timer for 30 seconds. So if you haven't had a chance to respond yet, do go ahead and finish what you're writing, please. And you have about 25 seconds left. Okay, voting is closed, and let's see where we landed. So I'm going to, again, just pick a few of these to read. I'm seeing guided tours, providing translations, historical interpreters on site regularly, a grade-targeted curriculum for teachers, give teachers virtual tours, be involved with the Yonkers Public Schools, extending programming to include relationship to the Hudson River, developing internships and docent programs, or having a fun podcast. These are some great suggestions. Thank you, everybody. And our next question, as I mentioned, these are all recorded and saved. And our next question is, this is our final Mentimeter question. What additional programs or events would you like to see at Phillips Manor Hall? And I'm going to go ahead and open voting. This is again a free response question. We gave some examples here that came to our minds: festivals, lectures, summer camp, after school programs, but we're really interested in hearing from you what your ideas are for programming and events at the Phillips Manor Hall. Okay, it looks like our responses are, we're getting some good responses here. They're slowing down a little bit. I'm going to start our 30-second timer. So if you haven't had a chance to enter a response yet, please do in the next 25 seconds. Okay, and let's see where we landed. So we've got another word cloud here. It looks like 3 of the most popular answers are after school programs, summer camps, and lectures. I will read out a few of these other answers. Historic music, I see after school, reenactments, a quilting festival, antique roadshow, staff development, cultural events, live performances, lectures on architecture. These are some great suggestions. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to everybody that answered this question and answered any of the questions on Mentimeter tonight. We very much appreciate your input. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Linda Cooper, the Taconic Regional Director.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate that you took the time out of your busy schedules to join us and hear what we have to say and help us plan for the future here at Phillips Manor Hall. So I oversee the Taconic region, and we are one of 11 regions statewide for state parks, and I have the honor and privilege of working with the people who run the state parks and historic sites and trails in the counties of Westchester, Putnam, Dutchess, and Columbia counties, sort of between the edge of New York City and the bottom of Albany. And I thought I would walk you through a little bit of our next steps in this process. You have the next slide. So the building is slated to be closed in a fairly short time period, and that would be after May 8th, 2021. And that is so that the staff can continue to go through and pack up anything that is there, clean out and categorize and arrange for transport to another location, anything that is in the upper floors that we use for storage or in the basement that we use for storage. So we need to be able to ready the building for construction. The construction would go out to bid in the spring, and then it would, when a bid award happens and the contractor comes on to the site, which is anticipated to be around the end of August, we would close the grounds once construction begins, because it's a little dangerous to have people walking around a site that has construction going on, active construction going on. We anticipate reopening the site next summer. That's pretty exciting. That's pretty quick. We ask you to remember that this entire project just started in January, middle to end of January. We're just a few short months into it, and we know we're cramming a lot of information and into this presentation and need to move quickly, but there will be so much opportunity for your input as this Phillips Manor grows in coming years and even coming months. So we really appreciate, again, your thoughts on this, on what we're doing. We do go through a regulatory review in these projects. So part of that is the normal state environmental quality review, SEQR. That has already begun, and we're doing a very careful and thorough review there. We do work with our State Historic Preservation Office on what's known as a 1409 review, where you deal with the Department of Interior's Secretary of Interior standards. This is SHPO, people often hear of. That is State Historic Preservation Office. That is in process. So even though we are the Division of Historic Preservation within state parks, we are required to make sure that the things that we ask of everybody on the outside, we also are complying with. So SHPO has already started some archaeological testing, and that's pretty exciting to see what can you dig up on this oldest site in the area, what might we find in the ground. We will also seek a building permit. It won't be from the city of Yonkers. It will be a New York State building permit, because that state, we have our own building inspectors that inspect state property. So after the construction drawings are complete, that will go through a building code review to make sure that it meets the New York State Building Code and all of the requirements therein. Next slide, please. We want your thoughts. I know we're going to go through what the questions that have come into the Q&A. And again, I direct you to the Q&A at the bottom of your screen to add more questions. But if you have any additional questions, you wake up in the middle of the night, you're thinking of it tomorrow, you get home, you talk to friends. We have a designated contact for this project. It's Daniel McEnany. His email is daniel.mcenany@parks.ny.gov. We will have a subscription list so that you may subscribe. There's a link being provided in the chat box, I believe. And if you sign up for that, we will keep you informed on anything that is happening and have some regular information that goes out. We encourage you to go to the State Parks website, where there is a page for Phillips Manor Hall, and we will have all of our latest project updates. And I suspect the Friends of Phillips Manor Hall may also be putting out information, and they may take it from the website and do it. I'm guessing this, but I'm hoping that they might also be able to help distribute information that you might be looking for. So we would like you to stay in touch. Again, it's Daniel McEnany is taking the information, and there is a subscription that you can sign up for. I think I hand it back to Laura Starr to begin the Q&A. And again, we thank you for your participation.